Thanks for coming, you guys. If you don't know me, I'm Josh Borovsky. I've been guiding muskies for about 20 years now. This is my website, promuskieguide.com. That's where you can find all my guiding information. Also, about a year ago, I started an online muskie publication with Nick Linder called Musky Insider. And if you haven't seen it yet, it is a great resource of muskie information, and it's totally free. So you just subscribe and it gets emailed and blasted to your inbox every week. You can also just go to muskieinsider.com to check out our classes. Wow, this is going to be a challenge not being able to see myself while I'm talking. I'll get through it. All right, so when I was putting this together, I had a bit of a challenge with, my idea was we have these classes coming up for Musky Insider, and I'm really excited about them. And I was going to take like just some really gold nuggets out of each class and kind of give you guys that, and just focus on things that are overlooked, right, by people when they're musky fishing. And the problem is we got 6 of these classes, and so I was putting together, and I'm like, this is going to be like 3 hours long. And so I kind of changed it up a little bit. I'm going to tell you about a few of the classes just right out of the gate. And then I'm going to share some of those nuggets with you as well. So super excited to have Luke Ronestrand. I'm sure most of you already know who he is. He and I are going to be doing a class together on open water tactics. You can see what we're got here to offer you. We're going to cover how to identify key waters, temperatures, calendar periods for likely suspended bites. We're going to talk about feeding frenzies and how the food web can make those things happen and all the movements that happen within them. And you kind of got the laundry list there. Identify key spots in the open water that will produce fish year after year, how to use your electronics to up your odds, and how to score casting and trolling and determine which is your best option. And I will get better, I promise. Late fall tactics is another class we're going to do, and I'm doing that one with Steve Herbeck. Super excited about that as well. And we're pretty much going to cover all things late fall musky fishing, and we're going to really encompass a lot of places, because as you probably know, Steve's been guiding in Canada on Eagle Lake for many years. But before that, he cut his teeth in Wisconsin. He's actually last year, because of the border issues, was in Wisconsin. I think he's starting out there again this year. And then I guide in Minnesota, and we've both been all over the place, and on different fall bites. So I think no matter where you fish in the fall, we're going to have some juicy stuff to cover and help you catch more muskies, especially the big ones this coming fall. So, and I by the way, I'm pretty sure this is going to be recorded, which is terrifying me right now. So you can always go back and look at these. I don't want to just read the bullet points to you. And then thirdly, we're doing a class with Ryan McMahon, and we're just going to solely focus on the metro area, a little bit more destination specific. And we might have bitten off more than we can chew with this, but we are going to actually try to cover all things metro from the beginning of the season to the end. So it'll be interesting to try and fit all that into one seminar, but we're going to attempt to do it. And the other thing I just want to say is I am excited about these classes just because we're doing them collaboratively. And maybe a lot of you don't know this, but it's funny. Like a lot of times I feel like us guides, we sometimes avoid talking to each other on the phone because we know as soon as the subject of fishing comes up, there's just this spark and the synergy that happens, right? Where it's going to be a 2-hour conversation. Like you got to block out the time to have the conversation with that person. So I know there's going to be a really good synergy and energy between us when we're doing these. And, I think it's going to be pretty special. So I'm going to jump into, the registration, by the way. So also, the class sizes, we're going to limit them. So, and we're doing that just because we want to make sure they're interactive and people have a chance to, voice in with us. And sorry, wow, this is like really challenging not being able to see anybody. Anyway, the class sizes are going to be limited. We're actually going to donate 10% of our proceeds towards the muskies, and I think all of our classes are for sure going to go over 2 hours, no problem. And we already have it up on our Musky Insider page. You can just go right here to this virtual tab, and you can see the information on the classes that we're going to be offering and the dates that they're going to be offered. Okay, now we're to the good stuff. I'll relax a little bit. So now I get to my purpose. My purpose is to use my creativity, analytical skills, enthusiasm to inspire and empower people to be successful and happy on the water and in life. And I'm excited and getting a little less stressed because I'm starting to live my purpose right now. So if you follow me on social media, you might have seen this quote I put up a day ago. So every decision you make and action you take while fishing has 3 possible outcomes in terms of your fishing success. Your odds of catching fish can be increased, decreased, or remain unchanged. But here's the catch. Like, I feel like there's very few things that I can personally think of that are going to leave things completely unchanged as far as your odds go. So pretty much everything you do out there is either helping you or hurting you, and that's kind of what I'm going to focus on here. So this is an analogy. I've never tried this before, but it seemed to make sense when I was putting this together. I always like to find analogies or stories to kind of explain concepts. So, and I call this the mousetrap concept or analogy. And so, as you can see in the photo there, I got 3 mousetraps set up. And let's just say, like just the percentages are there, right? One of those mousetraps, the one on the left, every time it goes off, it catches 40% of the mice. And the one in the middle catches 70% of the mice. And the one, on the right catches 90% of the mice, okay? But here's the thing, is these mousetraps are not totally created equal. The one that catches 90% of the mice, it's not a hair trigger at all. Like, they might walk over it and it might not get the mouse, okay? But if it goes off, it catches 90% of the mice. And then 70% ones, it's got a little bit better trigger, okay, than the 90% one. But, obviously you catch less. And then the 40% one, obviously you catch less mice with that, but the thing's got a hair trigger, okay? It just goes off every time. Now, let's also just add in that, because I'm going to do a little, kind of present an experiment to you here. Let's say that you could arrange these 3 traps, and you could set up a path for a mouse to like walk through these things, okay? And you want you want to catch the mouse. And knowing that the mouse, when it walks over a trap, if it sets it off and it doesn't catch it, the mouse leaves and you don't even get a chance with the other traps. What do you guys think would be the best way to like arrange those traps? So like if the mouse could walk over them in order and you could make it do that by a path, and I want you guys to type. So what do you guys think? This is going to be my first attempt at watching your comments here. So do you think, 90, like put 90% trap first, or the 70% trap first, or the 40% trap first? If you can set up all 3 of them and give yourself a chance for the mouse to walk over all 3. All right, I see some, I think there's going to be a little bit of a delay, but I see some coming in, and I see 90 first, 90, 70, 40, 90, 70, 40, 90. Okay, so you guys get the concept, right? The idea is that if you arranged them kind of from right to left, or at least on my screen it is, so it goes 90%, 70%, 40%, that makes sense, right? Because if it walks over the 90 and the trap goes off, you got them. But if it doesn't, then it's going to go to the next one and you still got a chance, and the next one and the next one. So basically, like, so much of fishing to me is this mousetrap concept, right? It applies to so many different things, and I'm going to kind of get into what those are, okay? So I'm going to jump to fishing. I will come back to the mousetrap thing eventually. So anyway, and if you might have heard this, I had talked about this concept a little bit on the Backlash podcast a week or 2 ago. But it's definitely worth re-mentioning. And this is not like just stuff that I like talk about. Like, this is like, I live this every day in the boat, and I feel so strongly and believe in it so much that and I realized how much it means to me, because once in a while, if I fish with people when I'm not guiding, I kind of lose control, and I don't just get to tell everybody what to do and everyone does what they want. And so we don't do things this way. And deep down, it like bothers me, because I know that it's costing us fish and it's costing us opportunities. And that's why I want to share it with you today. And so I have this clone angler scenario. So let's just say I could clone myself, or you could clone yourself. Okay. And clone one is using a really high hooking percentage bait, like a bucktail, okay? And clone two is using a really poor hooking percentage, like maybe a walk the dog, topwater, a glider, but not as good at hooking percentages, okay? It's kind of like the mousetraps again, right? It's like the 90% versus the 40%, except maybe they go off the same amount of time. So if you can pick, like, if all things are equal, okay, like if I, and I know this isn't the way it always is, but just for argument's sake, if I could guarantee you that you could get the same number of bites using either one of these baits in over the course of the day, which one would you pick? And I'll give you guys a chance to type. Hopefully this is pretty straightforward, but I'll be worried if you guys aren't following me here. Right, clone one. I'm seeing the clone ones come in here, okay? So if you get 7 bites on the bucktail, you're going to catch a lot more fish than 7 bites on the low hooking percentage bait. Okay, so now I'm going to jump to another clone scenario, okay? This has to do with speed, and I'm just going to take trolling because it's a nice, it's just an easy kind of controlled experiment to do. So let's say, again, we got our 2 clones, and clone 1 is going 4 miles an hour. He's trolling along going 4. Clone 2 is trolling along going 2 miles an hour. Okay? Now, I'm aware that the fish can prefer a certain speed each day, right? But let's just say, again, for argument's sake, if the fish don't care about how fast you're going and they'll bite either speed equally good, who do you think might get more bites and catch more fish at the end of that day? The boat going 4 or the boat going 2? And if you think you know why, you can state that too. Okay, I'm seeing faster is better coming in already. And exactly, and my thought on that is, I would think probably odds are the boat going 4 is actually going to catch twice as many as the boat going 2, because they're going to cover twice as much ground over the course of the day, right? So I'm going to kind of transfer this back. Well, actually, let's talk about the problem, which I kind of already brought up a little bit, okay, is, on any given day, they're not always just going to want the bait going 4, right? They might want the bait that's going 2 miles an hour, and they won't eat the bait that's going 4, okay? Or they might not want the bucktail. They might want the poor hooking bait, right? So on any given day, we got to kind of figure those things out, right? Like, what can we get away with today, okay? And so what I'm about to share with you is just a process on how to figure that out, because I feel like a lot of people, when they go fishing, they just grab a lure out of the tackle box. Everyone grabs what they think is the hot bait, and they just start chucking away, right? But if you can kind of create controlled experiments over the course of the day, it's really going to increase your success. And the key about this is you have to do it from the start of the day when you go out, because I feel like what a lot of people do is they might eventually get to this point, but if you're already half the way through the day, or like 3/4 of the way through the day, you've missed that whole data set of time to be doing this, and so you've just lost it, and you can't really make it up backpedaling. It's much easier to start doing much more controlled experiments and then let the fish tell you what's going on, and you can kind of narrow your scope. And so this is kind of my philosophy. I'm going to share a part of what I call my patterning progressions process with you. And one of them is just always fish with the best hooking percentage bait that you can get away with. And I don't think I need to explain that, because you guys were able to kind of figure that out through your answers. Oops. Let me jump back here. And always fish as fast as you can get away with, okay? The trolling example. So those are just 2 parts of the philosophy. You guys all seem to be on board with that. So how do we figure out what we can get away with, okay? You can fish your baits in a certain progressive order, fastest to slowest, okay? Why? Well, it's the mouse traps, right? We talked about it. Like, if you can get away with fast, okay, then you want to get away with fast. You're going to be that boat going 4. You're going to cover more water. You're going to get more bites. You're going to catch more fish, okay? and then also the hooking percentage, right? So so basically, in a nutshell, I come out of the gate every day, and by the way, the baits can change. I'm giving you examples, and a lot of times in the summer is a bucktail in the front of the boat, right? Because that is a bait that can be fished at a very high speed. It's also one of the highest hooking percentage baits, okay? So that's going to be first. The second bait might be, kind of like that 70% mousetrap, right? Maybe it's a surface bait. It's not going quite as fast. The hooking percentages aren't as good, but still better than the jerk bait that I'm throwing in the way back of the boat, which is usually the slowest, most erratic presentation. Okay, and we present the baits in that order because that way the fish sees one first, right? If we catch fish on that, it's telling us we can get away with fast today. If it's passing up both of those first offerings and hitting the last one in the boat, then that might be the fish telling us today is a day we need to slow down and kind of pick things apart. So that's just the beginning of the process. There's like layers to this. Like basically I have this massive flow chart in my head of like how to figure all this stuff out. So I just kind of gave you like the order that you start with. And I think it's just important on a macro level to start, just with the bigger picture, and then you just kind of keep narrowing it down. But I'm just here to tell you that, believe it or not, like just like the order of the baits that you fish matter, the colors, the order of the colors that you fish your baits in matter as far as refining it. And the spots, okay? Just the order that you fish your spots, and even if you're going to fish, like even if you just fish the same 8 spots every day, every time you go out, like you're not going to have the same result. Like fishing those in like if you fished them one way and someone else was fishing them the other way, you're going to get a different result. Okay, because there's a bunch of factors, wind, angle of sun, all kinds of things that can affect the activity level and positioning of those fish on those spots, even just within the day, and also where you are when windows occur. And I just want to give you an example of how refined this process can get, okay? So, this is just a photo from a time we were out on Lake Minnetonka, and using this process that I'm describing, at least part of it, we did the lure thing, right? And on this particular day, we basically figured out that the dominant color was, a black skirted bucktail with one chartreuse blade and one gold blade. And I was really confident that that was the most dominant color because we use this process that determined that. Because again, you can do kind of controlled experiments by where you put what you think is the most dominant color in the lineup and then test it against other colors, okay? But also what happened is the location, we got very refined too, because instead of just keeping it at, well, they're on the deep weed edge today, it's like, well, no, we can refine that a little bit more. It's deep weed edge points, and then refined a little bit more. It's actually just the tippy tips of the points, and actually it was just the tippy tips of the point that faced west. So when you narrow it down to that, especially on a lake like Lake Minnetonka, I mean, you're talking like one structure, like one big point out there to go all the way around the deep weed edge is going to take you an hour plus to fish it. But it only takes like 5 to 8 minutes to fish the tippy tip of the point. And if that's where the fish are, and on top of it, it's only the ones that are facing west, you're going to catch a lot more fish when those windows open up than everybody else. So that was just what I gave you, is a little sneak peek of one of the other classes that we're going to be offering. And I did this one last year, by the way, and it was really well received. Actually the 3 that I did last year, people seem to be really happy with and feel like they got their money's worth when I did the evaluation. So I gave you a little taste of this, patterning progressions process, but it goes deeper. There's a lot of layers to it, like I said, as far as figuring out the colors and the type of structure and the order that you should fish your spots in on that particular day, right? And then, I have adjustments for, how you need to adapt when you have invasive species in the water and how they can, affect this process and how you need to tweak it. How you need to make refinements if you're on like lower density population lakes where there's not high numbers of fish. Okay, how you make adaptations to this process for poor fishing conditions. Okay, and then all the different things that can open and close feeding windows, not just solar and lunar, but in the food chain. So if you're interested in learning more, that is another one of the classes that's going to be up on the Musky Insider website, and you can register there. I'm going to jump into figure eights now, and I was cracking up. So a while ago for Musky Insider, we actually sent out a survey to kind of get a feel for if we were going to offer classes, right? Like what some popular topics were going to be, which is part of why, we started with the ones that we did. But I had already done these other classes last year, and I just found it really interesting because we had like 500 people, like, they could check boxes, but they could also tell us, like, this is just what like they could just type in their answer. It could be anything. And out of 500 people, there was one person who said, I think maybe I could get a little bit better at my figure eight. And that's it. Okay. And so I'm just I think it's funny. I think everyone thinks they're an expert. And I do think the longer rods that we use today kind of allow people to get away with a lot more mistakes than maybe they used to be able to get away with. But I just think figure eighting is such an art form. And, I don't have time. And I'll kind of get into it, right? I do a whole class on figure eighting, but I've done it twice. It's 3 hours long. I mean, that's how much there is to like figure eighting. It is a total art form. I'm just going to share with you, focus on a couple of the things that I think are overlooked, and maybe one thing that's maybe most people are doing it, but it's so important I can't not mention it to you. So yeah, the challenge with figure eighting is I feel like everyone thinks they're an expert because if you musky fish long enough, like you're going to catch fish in the figure eight, no matter how horrible your figure eight is. Okay. But the reality is you only caught that fish, but as soon as you catch one, whatever you did then, that's just the way our brains work. They tell you like, that's what I should do every time because it worked. I caught one, but really it just worked for that fish. And that fish might have really wanted to be caught, right? It might have been really aggressive. And when I'm guiding, I mean, sometimes I can see people do just almost everything wrong. And if the fish just really wants to be caught, it's super aggressive, you're still going to catch it. But the vast majority of muskies are not that easily catchable, right? Like one little mistake and it's over. And this 50% statistic I have up here, by the way. So, again, with figure eighting, almost every single thing you do is either helping you or hurting you. But for me personally, I average usually about 50% of my catches each season for quite a few years now. And there's a few years where it was higher than that, are caught in the figure eight. So it's a really high percentage of fish. And so through my eyes, like I spend a lot of time talking to people when I'm guiding about technique. And I'm really passionate about doing seminars about it too, because it's just through my eyes, the way I look at it is your ability to do a good figure eight is either doubling your chances or it's cutting them in half. I mean, that's just how it is. And especially, when you get opportunities for big ones, this is a 56.5 incher right here, by the way, that I got up on the screen that was caught in the figure eight. And so really big ones can get caught that way as well. So I can't share a 3-hour seminar with you in an hour's worth of time when I'm trying to cover a bunch of different things, but I do want to give you a little bit of background because I almost feel like it's a crime to tell you like some of these things and not tell you all of it. So I have kind of I call the Dirty Dozen or the 12-step program of figure eighting, which is just all the mechanics, okay, of what you do and the movements you do and when you do them. I mean, there's some timing to it as well, but they all happen in a sequential order. And kind of the way I look at it is kind of like the mousetraps again, right? Hey, the most important step to be really good is step one, because if it's not good, like it's kind of like that 40% mousetrap. It already went off and now the fish is gone and you've ruined your chance, okay? And you don't even get a chance to do all these other things in this program, right? In the step program. So it's kind of each step needs to be built on top of each other, brick by brick. And what I see on the water, and I've, since I've been involved with Musky Insider, I watch a lot more YouTube videos than I used to too, just because they're part of our newsletter. And I'm looking through them as we're adding them in. People have some really advanced level stuff that they know, and I can see them applying. But a lot of times, these 12 steps, the mechanical steps that come before that, the foundation, the corners are cut on. So it's like, even though you're kind of like doing some advanced level stuff and reacting to what the fish is doing, you're getting close to messing this up by mistakes that you've already made because you're so focused on what the fish is doing instead of your technique. So I'm just going to share with you a few of those things that I think get overlooked. And the first one is just I even think the side of the boat that you fish off of matters. And I talked about this once in Musky Insider, so if you've been following along, you might have already seen this, and that might not be new to you. But, that's just one of those little things where, like, well, how much could it really matter? But I want you to think about something. How many of you have been, and I won't even ask you to give me a yes on this, because I feel like it's, I feel like we've all had it happen if you're going to be honest. And maybe people go, oh, I've never had that happen. But at some point, I think we've all had it happen where we're musky fishing, okay? And you get slammed by a fish. And, you get rocked and you go to set the hook, but it was really awkward. It kind of like caught you off guard. And it almost feels like it pulled the rod out of your hand or is about to. And you end up like not getting a good hook set and you miss it, right? I feel like at some point that happens to everybody, and especially it happens to you if you're fishing off the opposite side of the boat than what I have shown here. And I should also say that this kind of, in my opinion, depends on what hand you reel with. The majority of us reel with the right hand. And so if you reel with your right hand, you want to be fishing off the left or the port side of the boat, like the photo here. Now, if you reel with your left hand, I would actually recommend being on the opposite side. And here's why. I'll see if I can do this without seeing myself. I'm going to grab something really quick. It's got a little piece of a rod here, and I'm just going to put it right in front of my face. So hopefully you can see that. There's like a mega delay on my screen, so I cannot see. But anyway, I'm just going to go for it here so it's not weird. So I'm holding onto a rod, and if you look at the way I'm holding it right now, there should be a seam like right. I'll just put it by my face because I know you can see my face. So there's a seam right here, right, between your thumb and your fingers. That's the weak point of your grip. When you hold on to anything, whether it's a fishing rod, a hammer, a beer, that's the weak part of your grip. That's where if this rod's going to come out of my hand, it's going to come out right there through that seam, right? Now, the back side of your hand, that's the strong part of your grip. Like if you try to pull that rod away from me right now with my strong point facing you, you're actually just pulling it into my hand, right? And so that's what happens when you fish off the correct side of the boat for the hand that you reel with. If you're fishing off the port side and you reel with your right hand, especially for us guides, like I'm, looking at 5 different depth finder screens and 2 other people's baits to see if they have follows, right? And there's just really small little windows of time where I'm trained to kind of watch my bait and see what's going on with mine. I'm more focused on everybody else and boat control. But, if we're fishing off that side of the boat, even if I'm not paying attention and the fish hits, it's actually just going to pull my rod into my hand and away from my body. And my natural reaction is just going to be, to hammer it and come back the other way, even if you're not paying attention. You fish off the other side, you might be losing a rod and also likely a fish, if not your rod. So that's one reason why. But also there's another reason that has to do with figure eighting. And if you sweep, and I'll get into the sweep here a little bit, but if you're fishing off the side of the boat that I just kind of demonstrated for you, and you sweep left to right at the side of the boat to start your figure eight, basically, the motion of the boat going forward is going to basically accelerate your bait, which is just something when you get into all these 12 steps, right? You don't want your bait slowing down or stopping. Fish, you lose interest. It's not a good thing. Most of us know that. But if you're fishing off the opposite side of the boat and you sweep left to right, okay, what happens is that movement of the boat actually slows down what you're doing and makes your turns tighter too. And I remember one day, like I was fishing with somebody and they just had their boat set up that way. And I was like, my figure eights are horrible. Like I couldn't, and I'm really particular about my figure eights. And I know what to do, but I was just like, I couldn't put my finger on it. And eventually it was like, we were fishing off that side of the boat. So that's another reason not to. I think this, we'll see if this plays. There's a little video clip where, we're fishing off that side. The boat's really moving fast forward right now. We're in high wind. And so the guy up front, that's actually Nick Eddy from Musky Frenzy, his bait's actually coming in back by me. And you can see that fish hits it before he really gets to the figure eight. But it's kind of my point is because we were fishing off that side, it basically helps with this dragging the bait against the grain of the boat. By the way, I think that was one of the first muskies ever caught on those triple-bladed Apaches back in the day on Lake Vermilion. Oops. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so I'm going to jump to leash length, and I do think that this has been talked about by a fair amount of people, so it's maybe a little bit known, but I still see people I guide all the time who leave way too long of a leash. And you can see on my little diagram there. And what I mean by leash, by the way, is when you're figure eighting, the amount of line between your rod tip and your swivel is really important. And like most of these 12 steps in my 12-step program have to do with getting the most wide, giant figure eight that you can get. And all these 12 things add up. Like this little thing gives you 12 inches, and this little thing gives you 2 feet, and this little thing gives you 6 inches. But if I had to pick one thing that's the most important out of all the steps, I would say it's leash length, because I feel like it's the one thing where if you do it wrong enough and you leave too long of a leash, and you can see over there on the, like I see some people who will leave like a foot or 2 feet or 3 feet. And I mean, if you go, there's a threshold there where if you go too long, you will never, ever catch a fish pretty much. I mean, it'd be almost impossible. And the reason why that leash being short is important is whenever you are moving your bait through the water on a turn, okay, all baits have drag, no matter what bait it is. So the drag of the bait is always going to pull back towards the center of the circle that you're drawing with your rod. And so the more line that you give the bait to like travel like short, inside of your turn, it's like your rod will do a really wide turn. But if you leave a longer leash, it won't follow the path of your rod tip. It'll actually follow inside of it quite a ways. And if you leave too long a one, it'll actually like make it won't even turn. It'll just like stop and sink and do a 180 type of thing. And so if I had to pick one thing to be really good with, it would be this, because I do feel like if you have a perfect leash length, you can probably make a few, it'll help you like still catch a fish. If you make a few other mistakes, you might be able to still get away with catching the fish. And so when you figure eight, and this is my little kindergarten drawing here of my boat. I hope you enjoy that. But so the bottom there is the boat, and that, wow, I wish you guys could see it. I can't, I suppose I can do this with my cursor. Maybe you can see me moving it here. So, but this other line with the blue lines, that would be basically the path of your bait coming in. Okay. So as you approach, I kind of like to jog it out to the left and then sweep it along the boat to the right. And the distance between those two lines is what I kind of refer to when I'm training people and guiding them, as I call that your leash monitoring station. It's a really good opportunity, even if the water's dirty, where you can basically see how long that leash is. And if it's too long, reel that swivel up, get it close to the tip, okay, just like within a half an inch. And as long as you fix it somewhere in that vicinity between those two blue lines, it's not hurting you yet. The first time it's really gonna hurt you bad is when you turn out away from the boat. That's when it's gonna kill you. And the most important turn to be wide is your first one. If that's not wide, it might all be over already, okay? And by the way, like, I'm not going to get into this right now, but when you get into advanced level figure eighting, there's actually someplace else you should be looking. But until you can get to a point where you can master like getting your leash absolutely perfect every time and can do it blindfolded without even looking, then this is, in my opinion, where your eyes should be. Because like I said, if you don't see the fish, but your leash is really good and your technique's good, you could still catch that fish. If your leash is way too long, you might see the fish because you're watching it, but you're not going to catch it because your technique's going to be crap because your leash is too long. This right here, hugging the boat, is, I think, just lately what I see being one of the most overlooked things by, I think, a lot of anglers. And I think there's a reason for it too. We have these awesome long rods now, but one of the things that's changed in rod design in recent years is they're making the rod butts longer and longer to give us more, and it's awesome. I would, despite what I'm about to say, I would still encourage you to use the longest rod butt that you can, get away with the caveat of being able to get it out from underneath your arm when you're figure eighting, okay? Because if you can't do that, like I said, you're just cutting your catches in half by 50% right there. But in my opinion, I see people, I got the red X over here. When they come in and they kind of sweep along, the boat before they turn away, they're leaving way too big of a gap in here. Some people leave 3, 4, 5 feet, and like I said, you want your turns to be as big as possible. And the first one being the most important. So if this is your first turn, like you're already really hurting yourself, okay? You're making the fish make a much sharper turn than it needs to, where if you look over on the left here, if you tuck it up all the way to the boat, I like to get really close, but don't touch the boat because that will spook the fish. But I like to get really close, and that just makes your turn that much wider when you turn it out away from the boat. And I think what's happened is as these rod butts have got longer, when guys are transitioning their rod butt out from under their arm to do the figure eight, they're pushing it out away from the boat, right? Before they do their turn away. And kind of the workaround for that is you have to actually leave the rod tucked under your arm, push your rod down a little bit deeper into the water, and instead of stabbing outward away from you to get your rod out from underneath your arm, you want to stab down into the water so you can push it down, and which allows you to keep the rod close to the boat, get your rod butt out from under your arm, and then turn it away. And by the way, I'm aware that sometimes you can have fish that are boat shy, okay? And when I get into my advanced level stuff, there's an adaptation for that. I call it the peekaboo 8. But this still isn't it or part of that. So, all right, I got a way to get you guys involved here again. So I'm going to give you guys a little scenario. You can just give me a yes or a no here, but I want to know if this has ever happened to you, okay? Your bait is approaching the boat. You see a muskie following behind, and it follows right up to the boat, but when you start to make a move for the figure eight, the fish peels off or spooks and swims away. Okay, how many of you have had that happen? Give me a yes if you've had it happen. If you've never had it happen, you can say no, even though you're a liar. I'm seeing the yeses start to come through. Okay. If you've been musky fished for any amount of time, right? We've all had that happen. So, got another question for you. So, do you think it's possible, since the fish spooked when you moved, that your movement might have had something to do with spooking the fish? Give me a yes if you think that's a possibility. And if you think that's far-fetched, you can say no and be honest. But they seem like they kind of go together, right? It's like you moved, and right when you moved, the fish got out of dodge. So I'm getting a lot more yes. Thanks for responding and interacting with me, by the way. So I got another one for you here. So since your movement possibly spooked the fish, how many of you think that if it couldn't see you move, you might be less likely to spook it and have a better chance at catching it? Okay, makes sense, right? Seeing more yeses come through. So I even think what you wear can matter. And people like tease me about this. Like some of my buddies call me Little Boy Blue. But I basically, my whole wardrobe for the most part when I'm fishing, unless it's like I'm got all dirty laundry or it's so cold and I need something warm, I don't have something to fit this color scheme. But generally, like I just have a ton of shirts that are basically shades of light blue and gray, okay? And the idea is I'm just trying to mask my silhouette with the sky. It's like sky camouflage, right? Just for the reason that I just talked about. And you can laugh if you want, but I mean, I think I just proved to you that in certain situations, your movement, right, can spook a fish. And so if you can somehow camouflage yourself so that, the fish can't see you, you're probably going to have a better chance at catching it. And I certainly don't think that it's going to hurt you. So, hey, if it might help and it's not going to hurt, it's worth doing in my book. But also where I'm going with this, what's probably a lot more important than what you're wearing is the timing of when you make the move. And by the way, the move that you want to do, and this is another tip in my step program, right, is the lower you are to the water, the wider your turn will be on a figure eight. Okay, it's just like a protractor compass when you put the needle in and you have the pencil out, right? It's like the flatter the angle you get, it's just the wider of a turn you can make with that pencil with the protractor compass. It's the same thing with the figure eight. So if you're standing up, you're just not going to be able to use the full length of your rod and get it pulled completely parallel with the water the same way that you could by bending down and getting low, because you're losing some of the length of your rod to depth, right? But when you get down to water level, okay, now you can use the full length of that rod to get an extra wide turn, okay? But we just established that when you move and you drop down like that, okay, there's a chance that you might spook the fish. So the shirt helps, but probably what's a lot more important than what you're wearing, to be honest, is the timing of when you make the move. Okay, so I got a little video clip I'm going to show here for you that kind of demonstrates it pretty well. And by the way, this is some really old school footage. This is, if you're like thinking, well, that's good technique, but it doesn't look like he's that wide away from the boat. It's because this was so long ago. This was back in the day when like 8-foot rods were basically the longest rods that we had to work with. You know, we didn't have 10-foot rods.
It became one of those days to remember. Got him. Oh, yeah.
So I'll play that for you one more time. So kind of the idea is you can get low ahead of time, but otherwise you want to drop right there, right where I did.
Got him. Oh, yeah.
And kind of the idea there is that, again, if you can move when the fish can't see you, it's to your advantage. So if the fish is out away from the boat, you can, you know, if you see a follow coming from a long ways away, you can drop low early on, okay? But most of them we see when they're closer, right? And so that's the challenge, is you start to move and then you spook the fish with the move. So if you first just sweep the rod by the boat and then right when you're in the process of doing that turn away, you drop low, what it does is it basically allows the fish to swim by you, okay, along the side of the boat, and then it turns away. So it's focused on the bait going away from the boat. So you're behind it now. It's like looking away from the boat, and now you can drop down with that move without spooking the fish. So timing can be really key. So I shared, I don't know how many that was, maybe like 4 steps or something in this 12-step program, right? Because I could spend the whole time and I still wouldn't get through. It's like 3 hours worth of material. But I just will say that I think that if people would just focus on like the foundational steps, like those 12 steps, which I know it's not fair because I didn't give you all of them, but you would just be far better off mastering all of those before you get into worrying about what the fish is doing. Because I think I mentioned this once already. If you have really good technique, yes, I'll say there's like a more advanced level technique that has to do with responding to what the fish is doing, right? But if you have really good technique, even if you don't see the fish and you don't know it's there, or you're not good at like reacting to it yet, if you just kind of focused on all your mechanics being really sound, you'd still have a really good chance at catching that fish. And what I see happens to a lot of people, and actually I have a funny story. This happened to me. This was probably 25 years ago, long before I was a guide. You know, I used to have a job as a daycare director, and I'd go to Lake Harriet on my lunch breaks because I had this split shift in the middle of the day. And everyone thought I was a weirdo because I think for like, I don't know, like a 2-month period, I literally never even took my boat off of my trailer hitch of my truck. I'd go to work in the morning, you know, and work with the kids. I'd park in front of the secretary's office so my stuff wouldn't walk off. And then I had like this 3.5-hour lunch break, and I'd race over to Lake Harriet, eat my lunch in the car on the way there, and get like a solid, you know, 2.5, 3 hours of fishing. And then I'd come back and work the rest of my shift and work till like 6 p.m. And then I go back to the lake again and go night fishing again and just repeat, right? And did that all the time. And on one of my lunch breaks on Lake Harriet, I'll never forget this day, I was using a suic, and I had this fish come in, and it was hot to trot, and I was figure eighting, and like I could tell like this fish really wanted to be caught, but I was going round and round and round and round and round, right? And this thing wouldn't bite, and round and round and round and round, and it wouldn't bite. And, you know, and then it swam away, and I was mad at myself because I didn't know what I was doing wrong, but I knew I was doing something wrong. I'm like, okay, that fish wanted to be caught, and I like screwed it up. And so, you know, a few casts later, it came back in, same thing, round and round and round and round, round and round, and swam away, and I didn't catch it. And I was just pulling my hair out because I knew it was me. Like I was doing something wrong, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And so, and obviously I was less experienced then, so I knew a lot less. But I told myself, if that thing comes back one more time, I'm going to get my leash right and just focus on all the things that I know technique-wise, right, that I need to do. And I'm not even going to look in the water at the fish. I'm just going to get my leash right and do everything else and not even look. And sure enough, it came back again, and I did that, and I ended up catching it. Okay. And so obviously what was happening to me is I was getting so mesmerized by what the fish was doing that I wasn't focusing on my own mechanics and techniques. And so I think that happens to a lot of people, especially when a fish gets out of sync with you, is people just start to do, crazy stuff, making sharp turns, trying to bring the bait to the fish, stuff like that. And it usually just doesn't end well. So I would just encourage all of you to be honest with yourself and your technique. And also, usually we're fishing with friends. And as long as you guys are both thick-skinned enough, like definitely after every follow, you guys should critique each other, right? Because it's a lot easier for someone else sitting outside of this kind of charged situation to kind of see what you're doing and maybe have a thought of something that you could have done differently. Now, with that being said, when you jump into advanced level tactics, okay, then you shift your focus to everything is what the fish is doing. And again, it's like I've kind of figured out a way through this class to basically kind of categorize all the different types of follows and kind of attitudes of fish that you can have behind baits, and also how like the same attitude fish behind different baits requires different technique when you're responding to what it's doing because of the bait that you have. And it's like a massive flow chart in my head, and I've kind of figured out a way to categorize all that and help people with it. But like I said, what I see people doing is focusing, way too much on all of that when just their basic technique probably has, room for improvement in a lot of different areas. And when you get to really advanced level figure eighting, by the way, too, this is probably going to melt some people's brains thinking about it, it's the mouse traps again, right? Like figure eight technique is all about like you got like a whole bag full of mouse traps, right? And they're all these different percentages, and you can line them up in like a lot of different orders. And just over time, I feel like what I've been able to figure out is like the right order where you do this, then this, then this. And it's like, yeah, this particular thing, because this is the challenging thing about it, right? It's somewhat subjective, but I do feel like I can kind of explain the why with a lot of them if we want to have a debate about it. Is what I'm saying is there's certain things you can do. You have a fish come in and you do like a really sharp turn, and that could be a great trigger, right? To like get a fish to eat. But if you do that and it doesn't work, like you might have just completely ruined your chances to like, first of all, even if it hits, okay, like if you're at the boat and it's a weird angle, like it's not necessarily a spot you want the fish to hit, because if it hits there, the end goal is to catch it, and you're in a poor spot and angle to set the hook. So even though you get the fish to bite, you don't catch it. And it's just like in the beginning of this thing, it's like setting off that 40% mousetrap, and now you don't get a chance for it to walk over the other ones, right? And so when you get into a really advanced level figure eighting, it's kind of not about just getting the fish to eat, which I think is what a lot of people focus on. It's about being confident that you're going to make it eat, and actually saying, like, I'm not going to let you eat right here because that's a bad spot for me and I might not catch you. So I'm going to do some things with my technique to prevent that from happening, and I'm going to make you eat right over here, right where I want you to, and I'm going to be ready to, set the hook in the proper direction to give me the best chances of catching that fish when it eats. Let's see if I covered all this. I pretty much did. So that's kind of my little teaser, by the way, for the figure eight wizardry course. I've done it a couple times. I think both times we went, close to 3 hours because there's a lot of material. And then, both times I've done it, we've had, relatively smaller class sizes, which is really nice. It's a more intimate setting, and people do have the opportunity to ask a lot of questions. And I like that too, because sometimes it just, makes me think about things in a different light, or makes me go off on a tangent that I wasn't planning to go off on. And by the way, I am going to give you guys a chance to do that too. It's why I decided not to, make this thing as crazy long as I was going to, because I think anytime you're doing a virtual seminar, it's important to, at some point, give people, an opportunity to interact with you, because you're all here to watch me, and I could talk about muskies for like 15 hours, but if I don't talk about what you want to hear about, then, it's not really very helpful for you. So I will give you a chance to ask some questions at the end. So I'm going to shift to the moon a little bit. This is another chance for you guys to interact. So I think I might know how this is going to go, but I'm just curious. I'm going to give a little more time because I actually want to see the answers. So I want to know if you pay attention to the moon phases, like the full moons and the new moons. If you pay attention to those things, give me a yes, type a yes in your comments. And if you don't, you can say no. And there's a little delay here, so just give me a second. I'm a little more curious on these ones. Seeing a few yeses come through. I'm going to give it a little more time. But it looks like a lot of these people so far getting a lot of yeses. And I figured that, right? It's not too secret with us anymore. I think a lot of us, see the effect the moon can have on the fish. Okay. Ooh, there's a couple people that said no, too. So, and maybe I'll let me see what my next thing is here. It's okay. So I'll jump into moonrise and moonset, and then I'm gonna retort here a little bit. But so if you're paying attention to the phase of the moon, are you also paying attention to moonrise and moonset? Give me a yes if you're paying attention to those things, and a no. And I already see some people typing in like overhead and underfoot as well, which are also key times. I see someone say yes, but weather and water conditions trump lunar cycles. Totally true. By the way, I'll just tell you right now before I forget that kind of part of where I'm going with this is so I'm a big believer in the moon, right? But I don't think that the moon phase, I don't think the fishing is better on any particular day because of the moon. Okay, I think that in part of why I'm asking these questions is what the full moon and the new moon, kind of the phenomenon that happens around those days, is there's 29 and a half days in a lunar calendar. That's how long it takes to go from a full moon to a new moon and back again. Okay, and sunrise and sunset are really key times, and in my opinion, moonrise and moonset can also be really key times, as overhead and underfoot can be too, but especially rise and set, especially when you have a full moon, because it can be a light intensity change as well, just like sunrise and sunset. Okay, so just even with that example, like moonrise, moonset, sunrise, sunset. Okay, you got these 4 potential things that can actually tell us the when, right, of when the fish might bite on a particular day, because those are events that happen at a specific time every day. They're predictable. Okay. And what happens is when you take the day of the full moon, okay, and a lot of people are like, oh, full moon, it's going to be great fishing. Like one of the people said in the comment, I think the overall conditions and just how the bite is and the weather, water temps, all that stuff is going to affect the overall bite much more than the moon. But the moon, what it can do is it can tell you the when, okay? And when you have the day of the full moon, and then you take the 3 days before and the 3 days after, and the same thing with the new moon, 3 days before, 3 days after, those are the only days of the 29 and a half day lunar calendar where moonrise and moonset will happen in a very close amount of time to sunrise and sunset, okay? And that's kind of, to me, what the magic is it's the when, and you're taking these 2 events that both seem to, trigger musky activity, and you're cramming them into a small amount of time. And what it does is it seems to intensify the window and also make it more predictable. A lot of times the window is basically the time between those 2 events happening. And kind of the way it lines up is so with the full moon, if you were 3 days before, moonrise would be an hour and a half or so before sunset, okay? And then you get another day closer, and it's probably 45 minutes. And the next day, it's 15 minutes away from sunset. And then the day of the full moon, a lot of times, moonrise and sunset are literally 4 to 7 minutes apart from each other. And this is part of the thing that I think is overlooked, is that's the window. It's 7 minutes, and it's incredibly short, but it's also incredibly intense, right? And so it's a little more of a precision deal, that it's not just go fishing on the day of the full moon. It's be out there and also just where you are. If I got a 7 minute window, I want to be making the cast at the fish on the waypoint to the minute that. If you play your hand that way, you're going to get a lot more bites. Okay. And And I know there were a few people that said no, by the way, with the moon too. And I just the one explanation, and I'm going to keep their name out of it, but it's a very well-known musky person who you probably all know who it is. Someone who I respect a lot, and I've learned a lot from them, and I know I have a lot more to learn from them, which is why I'm not going to bring their name into this. But to my surprise, they were like really poo-pooing the moon, and this is like somebody who's a real thinker, who thinks about all these mousetraps, just like I'm talking about, right? But his kind of take was like the moon doesn't affect the fish because there's no reason for it to. Like I can't there's no like scientific reason that I can like come up with, but with why the fish like would bite more or be more active during that time. And I kind of get that, right? Like, because this person was kind of saying like, well, okay, I will say when there's a full moon and it's dark out, because on the backside of the full moon, by the way, once you get to the 3 days after, moonrise happens after sunset. So it gets dark and then it gets light again when the moon comes up. He's like, that's a light intensity change. Okay, so I can see why that would trigger a fish to bite because of the moon, right? But not the moon itself. And if it's cloudy or whatever, then that light intensity is not changing. So what would be the reason for that? And we also know that the moon affects tides. But, this person was kind of like, well, but I mean, on an inland lake, like the tides are like, a big wind would affect, the lake levels and stuff and current way more than like an inland tide would be with the moon. So that doesn't make sense. And so this person I was kind of having this debate with was like, so the only thing left is mysticism, but I'm not really big on mysticism, right? And so, my comeback when we kind of had a talk about this or a little bit of a debate was, well, just because we can't explain why doesn't mean that it's not happening and not a thing, right? Because even when you use the other examples, like the light intensity, okay, well, like it got dark out and it got light out and the muskies bit because of that. But why? Like, I mean, they can't talk, right? So we don't necessarily know. And even like when a storm's coming, because this person's like, oh yeah, when a storm's coming right before a front, the barometric pressure changes and the fishing's great. Okay, and yeah, and I agree with that, by the way, but why? Like, what does that do to the muskie to trigger it? Like, we can't really totally explain that either, right? And I kind of just, like, left him with this thought, as I just said, look, man, like, when I get home every night from guiding, my house is dark, and I walk up to the door, and I turn on a light switch, and when I hit the switch, like, a light comes on. I don't know jack about electricity, okay? I don't understand it. I don't understand the way it works, but I know when I touch that switch, like a light comes on, okay? And I don't necessarily need to know how all that works to know that it's a thing. When this happens, this happens. And I'm telling you, when that moon goes up and it goes down, the muskies bite, especially when it's close to sunrise and sunset. And moon overhead and moon underfoot can be other key times as well. And no, I can't explain why, but I can just tell you, like, there's been a bajillion times guiding and sometimes it's like we're putting in a 16 to 18 hour day and it's been, a slump fest all day long. And then you catch like 3 fish and like 15 casts at moonrise, right? So anyway, I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but there were some doubters too. So I wanted to kind of address it. And for the rest of you who are kind of already on board with the moon thing, if I want to ask you this, oops, now I'm like cheating ahead, but I'm curious, like how many of you, so you're watching the moon cycles, right? And whether it's a full moon or a new moon, I want to know how many of you pay attention to the distance of the moon and how close or far away it is from Earth. And be honest. I mean, it's okay. I'm guessing there's a lot less. I know I can see some of the people on here who are people that I guide, so I know they're going to maybe have an answer that's different. But I'm just curious currently how many of you pay attention to the distance of the moon versus the phase of the moon. So give me a yes if you pay attention to the distance of the moon, and a no, which you can pretty much change to not yet because you're probably going to want to after I'm done talking to you. Okay, I'm seeing some no's come through now. I see someone saying pink days, so they know where I'm going with this. But, and by the way, a lot of people are not even aware that, the moon is just like when it's orbiting around Earth, you would kind of, I guess, think that it would probably be a circle, but it's not. It's actually an oval elliptical shaped orbit, right? So that means that there's points in the moon's orbit where it's actually really far away from Earth, and points where it's really close. And that's why you've probably noticed it at some point when you've been fishing or driving down the road, right? And sometimes you look at the moon and you're just like, wow, like moon looks huge tonight in the sky. And then there's other times where it's just a little dot in the sky, right? That's basically because just even visually with your eyes, you can see the difference with how close it is. So if you buy into the idea, which hopefully you do by now from what I've said, right, that the fish are affected by the moon, then doesn't it make sense that maybe the moon would have even more of a powerful effect on the fish when it's closer to Earth, and maybe less of an effect when it's further away? And so, by the way, with this orbit cycle, the apogee-perigee cycle, that the closest point is perigee or perigee, potato. That's the closest point to Earth, okay? And apogee is the furthest point away. And it takes roughly 27 days for that cycle. So it's not related to the full moon and new moon at all, okay? It's just a different cycle that just has to do with the distance of the moon. And so what happens, though, is, and I'll jump back to that, by the way. So what happens is there's this 27 or 27 and a half day cycle, 27, 28 day with the apogee-perigee, and the 29 and a half day with the lunar calendar. And so you kind of have these two wheels, right? And there's kind of spinning at slightly different speeds, but once in a while they hit in the same spot, okay, where it is a full moon or it is a new moon, and the moon is also at its closest point to orbit, okay? And it only happens a handful of times, because what happens is they'll line up for a couple months, where they're hitting pretty close to each other, and then they get out of sync with each other, and there might be a month or two where there aren't any, or there's very few days where this lines up. So it's a pretty small handful of days that this event of all these things lining up just perfectly actually happens over the course of a season. But here's the real kicker, okay, is I actually call these pink days. I highlight them in pink on my calendar, okay? And for 13 of the last 17 years, the biggest fish in my boat has been caught on one of these days. And to me, that is insane, okay? Because, I mean, I'm on big fish water all the time, but it always comes down to these days, and I swear it would be almost perfect, like 17 out of 17, except for the fact that, like, the years usually that we didn't catch the biggest fish on those days is because we lost it, right? Like, we had it on, and it just didn't work out. Like, it didn't make it to the net, and so some other fish we caught on some other day trumped it. And, like last year, by the way, was a year where we missed it. But, I mean, we were 2 days off of a pink day, still in moon. So very, very close. We got a 56-incher. One of my guests got a 56-incher on a topwater bait. And, by the way, this photo right here, so this was a 56 that we got in the morning. It was within minutes. I'm trying to remember if it was moonrise or moonset that particular morning. Same day, okay? We got a 55-incher that night, and that was also very close to the other moon event. So, and those are the only two fish we caught all day, by the way. But 56 and a 55 in the same day, taking it, right? It was a pretty incredible day. But it was really like demonstrates the pink day magic. And I'll also add that in the same time frame, this was on Lake Vermilion, that we caught these two fish. In the day before, which was also a pink day, I should add, we got a 53 and a half, okay? But I know of at least like there might have been 4 other fish in this stretch of pink days where they were also 55 inches or bigger, okay? So the big ones, and it's just, I feel like it happens every year. So yeah, pink days equal big fish, basically is what I'm saying. But again, I want to stress that I don't think the overall day is necessarily any better, okay? What it seems to do is I think it seems to make moonrise and moonset even more of a guarantee that you're going to get bit then. And I don't know, I mean, I don't have any scientific data, right? It's just theory. I read it somewhere once that the larger the mass of the animal, it's possible that like the lunar impact might have more of an effect, which would be an interesting, right, applying it to musky fishing because they're bigger fish than the other ones, right? But again, kind of like the light switch thing, like I don't know why, but I all I can tell you is if you are fishing on one of these pink days, it's relative to the system you're on, but a lot of times that system will cough up the biggest fish in the system, on these days. And it's usually at moonrise or moonset. And so again, the whole day is not better, but it just seems to make it more of a guarantee. And so on these days, a lot of times my mindset is like, all we got to do is find her. Like, she could be the laziest follow, right, in the world. But if I just know where she is, we pretty much know when the dinner bell is going to ring and when she's eaten. So a lot of these fish that we have caught over the years have been that scenario, where we have that 8-minute window of time or whatever that I'm talking about. And it's a pink day, and we saw a giant, and we left it alone, and we rolled in there, and we waited till the clock ticked away, right, to moon, and we made the cast and caught the fish. And I debated whether to do this or not, but I'm coughing it up. I don't want to make you guys too mad. Well, geez, he's just teasing us with some information for his classes, and he's not giving us anything. So I got the slide up here. I always forget. I try to look on my phone to see what you guys are seeing, and I can't see it. So, and by the way, I hope I'm not missing questions. It's just with the lag and watching my phone for the questions, it's too hard. So I am going to leave time at the end here to answer those. But I'll leave this up for a second, just because some of you, you could probably just screenshot it, actually, I guess, with your phone or your computer right now. But these are the pink days of 2021. And so, and I'll also add, like, if you really want to up your odds even more, like, a good thing to do is, so, like, here's when the pink days are, okay? Well, on some fisheries, I can think of one off the top of my head, June 21st to 26th, right, is a really good time to catch big fish, right? On other fisheries, it might not be, okay? And so part of the strategy with this, if your goal is to catch big fish, is to basically catalog all the peak times for big fish on different lakes. And this is another class, by the way, that I'll kind of get into too. There's a way to do that and use analytics to basically figure out, because a lot of lakes have like these little, like, maybe 2-week periods, right? Where if you start pulling up data, you realize, like, wow, like 70% of the fish over 54 inches or 50 inches or whatever, right, are caught in a 2-week window of time, like on this lake right here. And then the other 25% are caught in another 2-week window of time. And maybe there's not so many big ones like the whole rest of the year, right? That's kind of an exaggerated stat, but actually there is a lake that basically has exactly what I just said. It's a metro lake. And so the idea, if you really want to up your odds, is not just to be on a lake, right, that has big fish or whatever, but be on a lake that normally would kick out really big fish during these calendar periods. And so that might mean from season to season that you're a different place on the pink days than you were the season before. And so I have a whole class on all this, by the way. So I gave you the days, but in this class, I call it How to Catch More and Bigger Muskies from Your Couch. And I did this class last year, by the way. So I did this one, and I did the figure 8 one, and I did what I call the system and the patterning progressions. And people seem to be really happy with all of them and feel like they got their money's worth with the content that they got. But I can tell you, of the 3, that this was the one that people liked the best. And one of the comments that cracked me up, and this is just, how musky guys are, right? Because I saw it on more than one evaluation of the class. I think there were like 3 of them that basically said, this is great. Like, I've got so much information that's going to help me going forward. And I hope you never offer this class again, because I don't want everybody else to have it, right? So, but I am offering it again. And so in that class, I explained a little bit of the pink days, but I actually have basically a mathematical formula with how I figure these days out. I'm actually going to teach you how to do that on your own, so you can figure out when the pink days are on your own and not have to, follow me around on social media every year to find it, which I'm okay with, by the way. But also, we're going to cover the key dates that I talked about, right? How to find those key calendar periods on any given lake and use analytics to do that, and where to find that information. Also going to look at all the stocked fisheries, how to, basically you can make predictions years in advance of where good fishing is going to happen, and also where it's going to tail off and not be very good anymore. based on, the stocking reports. And so, I go through like how to calculate all that, figure it out, look at growth charts of fish. Also do the same thing with the tiger fisheries, which is another key one where you can basically figure out like when the good years to be on that's even more finite because tigers don't reproduce. So it's pretty much all what was put in tells you what you're fishing for in any given year. And then also, I think what people enjoyed is, and by the way, I'm just going to be clear. I'm not going to like give you like a laundry list of all my Lake X's, but I think what I'm going to offer you is like more valuable because I'm going to teach you like how, like a lot of this stuff. I just like teaching people how to do it themselves. And if you're lazy, you're like, I just want it given to me on a silver platter. But if you're someone who like likes to put a little extra effort in, I'm giving you way more because you can find Lake X's that I don't know about. And one of the funny things that I'll share with you too is, so when I was preparing for this class last year, I was like, kind of showing this process of how you can make some educated guesses about where Lake X's that nobody is fishing, might be, and all the different things that kind of go into that and clues. And I didn't want to burn like some of my Lake X's, right? Because I know, then they're not Lake X. As soon as a few people find out, it's not that big of a Lake X anymore, right? And so I was trying to like find examples of lakes to like teach this process to people, but like, so I'd pick like, oh, this is one, whatever, that's kind of an example that could be one. But then as I like dug deeper, I'm like, whoa, like I find like this is one, you know what I mean? Like there are muskies here for sure, because I found them in a survey net, or I like researched the resorts and found like some got caught there. So I just thought it was funny. Like even when I was just trying to teach people how to find them, I was finding more, on my own as well. So that's, I think I had more I wanted to share with you, and I guess I want to see what time it is. I don't even know if I can see that right now. But I feel like I've been talking for a good while, and I did want to give you guys a chance to ask questions. I was going to kind of go through all 6 of the classes and focus on these overlooked things, but I thought it was more important to leave some time for you guys to ask questions. If someone wants to text me or put in the messages what time it is too, because I cannot see that on my computer or my phone. And I'm asking just because I don't want to, I know Jason Hammernick's doing a presentation, and I don't want to overrun on his time. And I have no idea how long I've been talking for. But I am watching the contents. Keep in mind that there is a delay here. So I'm going to start watching. And if you guys have some questions, you can fire those out at me. But also, if someone can let me know what time it is, that'd be fabulous as well. 12:17. Okay, so I've been talking for hour and 15. Okay. Wow, I'm seeing no questions unless there's just that long of a lag, which is like really weird to me. All right. So I see in your 90, 70, 40 scenario, obviously the bucktail is the 90. What are some of the 70 and 40 type lures? And I'll answer that in a second. But before I do, I should also clarify that one of the caveats is that like the 90%, like the bucktail, can still be the hair trigger, right? That can still be, so it's not like they're always going to pass that one up for the other two. Like sometimes they actually prefer that. They want it, and they want it going really fast. And so I want you to keep that in mind too, that it's not totally fixed, because and that's why like I kind of do that process, is you let the fish tell you what they want, because what they truly want is kind of more of that hair trigger bait. But I would just say, your better hooking baits, a bucktail, anything that's going to be a straight retrieve, and have, a wire shaft, or even into the hard bodies, anything that's straight retrieved is generally going to have a higher hooking percentage and be subsurface. When you go up to the surface level, with top water, you lose a little bit, just because we lose fish when their heads are out of the water, right? And when you use a surface bait, you're pretty much starting there on the surface. So, but also, by the way, if you can, some surface baits like a flaptail or a globe, you can have spreaders put on those. Those tend to be really good hookers, by the way, when you can add those onto the bait and not hurt the action of them. And then, the next step down is going to be, more erratic. It's just, I would just say in general, the more erratic the bait, the poorer hooking bait it is. Or even if you work like a crankbait, right? You could straight reel it in. It's going to be a pretty decent hooking percentage bait. But if you're like ripping it and twitching it, then the hooking percentages are going to go down a little bit. But again, with that being said, in my process, there are days where that's what they want, right? Is they want that more erratic presentation. That's what you need to do to flip that switch. And I would say kind of the bottom of the barrel, in my opinion, with like the poorest hooking percentages would be like a walk the dog, like a lighter weight walk the dog top water with 2 hooks, right? And you get a heavier one with 3 hooks. The heavier the bait, the hooking percentages go up, but also, the number of hooks. And another little tip I'll throw in there, by the way, while I'm on it, is I would always just encourage you guys to use the largest size hooks on baits that you can get away with, okay? Because it definitely increases your hooking percentages, and I also think they're just easier to cut out of fish. But also keep in mind, again, there's a limit. Like there are certain baits where, if like a topwater bait, if you put too big of a hook on there, it'll actually change the buoyancy of the bait. It'll sink and it won't work properly. And so there's a limit to all those lakes or baits that you kind of have to play around with your hook size. So, and hopefully, and I think that was Roger's question, I answered it enough where I think it's easier to kind of, and everything else is in between, right? What I just mentioned from good and poor hooking percentage baits. So walk the dog top waters, then next it probably goes to gliders. Those would be the ones that are definitely, on the lower end on the other side. So beavers I've been kind of streaky with. They're erratic. I have added an extra like auxiliary hook to the nose on those baits to increase the hooking percentages. So that's another like little modification that you can do. But I will add that sometimes the fish are just really eating those baits deep. And so a lot of times I kind of like go on or off with that hook depending on how the bite is. If they're hammering baits, then a lot of times I'll take that auxiliary hook off just because I don't want to be trying to cut it out of its throat, right? But if we're missing fish and it feels like they're headshotting them, then definitely the auxiliary hook goes on. All right, so I'm going to scroll through here because I'm probably like way behind on questions. Let's see. I see, would you prefer moonrise or sunset moon? I'm guessing what they mean by this is like on a full moon, do I like it when the moon comes up before the sun goes down, or do I like it better when the sun goes down and the moon comes up? And I would say with the full moon, I like the latter. I like it when the sun goes down, it gets dark out, and then it gets light out again and the moon comes up. And I'll also add, and I know there's exceptions. I've seen a few, right? And maybe it's even lake specific, but generally most of the places I go, while I have really good success at night, at moonrise and as the moon's rising up, a lot of places I fish, once the moon gets way up there and bright in the sky, unless we have clouds to cover it up, I struggle more, right? It's more the key time is as the moon is rising. Let's see. Cole Beardsley, can you recap your figure 8 process? That's going to be a tough one. That, like I said, that's basically like a 3-hour deal. But I will just say that the majority of my 12-step programs for figure 8ing, like at least the basic fundamentals, all has to do with getting the widest possible turns that you can get. And I covered a few of those things, right? Like one, getting your rod as close to the edge of the boat as you can get it before you turn it away is going to make your turn wider than being like 3 or 4 feet away, or even a foot, like however far away you are, that's just less wide that your turn is going to be. Also, I talked about, body mechanics, that the lower you are to the water, the wider your turn will be. It's kind of the protractor compass, phenomenon. And then also the shorter your leash is, meaning the amount of line from your swivel to your rod tip, the wider your turn will be. Those are a few of the ones that I covered. There's a lot more, and then some of it's kind of bait specific too. So it's like a 3-hour answer to that question. So that's my short one for you. I would encourage you though to check out that class because we will take a huge deep dive on it. I'm not going to leave any stones unturned for you there. Okay, let's see if I can catch up with where I was. All right. I have, let's see, if you have not been on a lake for a while, what color would you start with in the one spot in the morning? In sunny and cloudy. So that's going to be somewhat lake specific. So it's just hard to answer, right? I would say just generally, and there's exceptions, right? So this is a tough one, and I'll give you a little hint with it too. But so I mean, generally, I just if there's dirty water, a lot of times I'll use brighter colors. But in general, a lot of the places I fish, I feel like if it's a bright sunny day, and I'm using a bucktail, which I think was the example he gave. I like to use either silver blades, gold blades, copper blades, something flashy, right? Again, there's exceptions, so it's hard to like make rules about this. And if it's cloudy out, I like black a lot. It might be black, black orange, black chartreuse, but there's just so many idiosyncrasies to all the different lakes that you have that what the bait in that one spot is just gonna vary. I will tell you, though, that this will be your little hint, is that what's more important when you're actually dealing with color is what you have in your number 2 and number 3 spot, okay? If you're actually trying to figure out, in the process of figuring out what the best color is, okay, and you have not figured that out yet, and you have a guess of what you think the best color is, you might want to consider not having that one in the front of the boat because basically that allows you to test it. Let's see here. Do you think the key in clear water? So I have one. Do you think the key in clear water is after dark? And after dark, do you use big baits or small baits? I would definitely say after dark, as far as baits go, definitely erring on the side of big. I mean, it's hard not to it depends on the time of year, but it's hard a lot of times a year not to have at least one person, sometimes it's all of them, throwing a big bladed bucktail, like 10s, 13s, that type of stuff. I'm usually going to err on that side. Bigger profile, bigger bait, easier to find, throws off more vibration. Yes, I think night fishing. And keep in mind that night means from when it gets dark out to all the way to when the sun comes up in the morning, especially on some of our metro lakes. It's not always super fun, but there are bites that happen, at 3 or 4 in the morning on these lakes. And a lot of times it's just, those are the only times a day that these fish aren't getting pressured. And technically they still are. Our fish get fished around the clock in the metro area. But yeah, on clear water, definitely night's going to be good. Also, a real, nice cloudy, windy day, or even when it's sunny out, just big wind. I like big wind on clear water. I think we kind of got through. think I addressed all the questions that were on here. I'll give you guys like maybe a minute or two, but I'm seeing some thanks. And by the way, I have it on the screen, but I just wanted to thank you guys, especially those of you that were with me from the start, because I felt like a little bit of a train wreck there with my technology issues in the beginning. And it was really difficult for me not to see myself real time or see your comment. I mean, I at least figured out your comments. It's just there's a delay, so it just made things a little wonky. But you know, it's musky fishing, right? Once you get in your groove, you kind of get going. So thanks for hanging with me. You know, if you're interested in booking a guide trip with me, I got my site there. Also, just want to point out, if you're not subscribed to Musky Insider, it's free, and it comes every week. We put out a new issue. Lots of good information in there and humor. That's also where you'd go to find more information on registering for those classes. And I am making it a point to become more involved and consistent about posting updates and tips and things like that on my social media pages too. So I'd appreciate it if you'd follow me there. And I'll jump back here too to see if I had any more questions. All right, I think I'm looking pretty clean. I think I got them all answered. So I am going to sign on out here. And thanks for hanging with me, you guys. I appreciate it.